Sir, good afternoon. Sir, good afternoon. Can you hear me? Dr. Abhimana.
Yes, yes, I can hear you well.
Yes, sir. I'll just pin you so that we can see the video, your video. I hope you are able to see it. Okay. I'll stop this screen, sir, so that you will be able to come in the main screen. No problem. Sir, you are. Okay, sir. You are able to hear me?
Very well, I can hear you.
Yes, sir. We are also able to hear you. Okay, sir. In the next 10 minutes, we'll start the program, sir. Anything you would like to tell?
For now, I'm okay. I don't think I have any problem.
Okay, sir. Okay, no problem, sir. I think it will be all fine. It will be all fine.
Dr. Cedric, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
I can hear you, Professor.
Thank you. So we are all in the meeting room. So we start sharply at 2. So just 10 minutes to go. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Please wait in the room. Please wait.
Yeah. I am very okay. I have no problem.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm just, because of being a co-host, I'll just go to the waiting room because many people are entering. So I'll just check and allow them to enter. Please allow me to go. I'll join you. I'll join you back.
Thank you, Prof.
Dear sir, Dr. Abhimana, I will. Dear sir, Dr. Abhimana.
Yes,
Sir,
I can hear you.
Yes, sir. For a time
I
being.
can hear you.
For a time being, I will unmute you. I will mute you, and then within 5 minutes, I will unmute you, sir.
Okay. Did you do something that I may not share the screen for now?
Just a minute, sir. Please.
Oh,
yes, sir.
Now, because you are sharing, I cannot share the screen. I guess
sir,
for now.
Now I stopped it. Please try, sir. Now it is enabled. Please try. You're sharing.
Okay. I think it is okay now.
Yes, sir. It's coming up. Yes, it's perfect.
Yeah. Okay.
And there is a slight. Okay, sir. Sure, sir. Sure, sir. It's fine. Fine.
Okay. All right.
Okay, sir. Check on. Thank you, sir. Thank you. We'll come in touch with you within 5 minutes. We'll start the session. Less than 5 minutes. Within 5 minutes.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Colin, sir.
Yes, sir. Available, sir.
I'm taking care of the participants, so don't worry.
No problem, sir.
Allowing everyone. So
sir,
I have allowed Vasiki,
I think Vasuki ma'am is moderating the whole session. Am I right, sir?
Yes. She has joined. She has joined in her name. And our own resource persons, Dr. Yashmin is here.
Yes.
I will try, but I was being further
Yes.
to where I was, it was okay for them. I don't know.
Good, sir. Good to see.
I'm just checking the
Yes, sir.
participants and I'm allowing one by one into the Zoom room, Father.
Yes, yes, please.
Professor has joined. I'm just letting him in.
Yes, sir.
Can we check on the moderator, sir, for her audio and video?
Yeah, you can check. You can check. She is available.
Madam, good afternoon. Collins from Sacred Heart. Can you please unmute, ma'am? Unmute yourself.
Amma, unmute panna sol.
Sir, I have unmuted.
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Very well, ma'am. Very well. I'll pin you. Okay, ma'am. You're audible. You're visible and audible, ma'am. Perfect.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you.
Father, there is a name called Sivanyanam from SHC.
Yes, yes.
Yes. Yeah, I have admitted him, Father.
Okay.
Dr. Collins, can we start? Dr. Collins?
Yes, we can start, sir. Sir, we can start.
Yes.
We are
yes.
ready. Please start.
Yeah, please start. Start.
Good afternoon to each and everyone present on Zoom and YouTube. Welcome to this 9th plenary session of the 5-day International Web Conference. It is with tremendous pleasure that I welcome each one of you to our maiden collaborative venture. The 4 institutions as hosts on a digital platform connecting to the various parts of the world serve us to hone in on the skills we have been interested in learning. This 5-day event has been a way to gather every one of you from various parts of the world. And it has bound in a way uniquely wired. Through this conference, we spend valuable time with every one of you so that all voices are heard and esteemed. The incredible diligence and dedication of the collaborative environment in this innovative enterprise of close partnership is truly global, as we have plenary speakers, paper presentation session moderators, paper presenters, guests, and benefactors, truly international in word and deed. The displaced social changes have its impact on education and technology and emanate transformations in knowledge dissemination. This conference celebrates the legacy of humanitarian spirit, sharing, and cooperative living and learning globally. The collaborative institutions have always nurtured and valued the elegance of embracing semantic, syntagmatic, paradigmatic teleporting of the metadata of the knowledge. The cognitive process of structuring and restructuring of information these 3 days has been immense with your contribution and participation actively. Welcome each one of you. On the positive side, the web conference is an example of the many facets of teaching learning scenario. The change in scenario has matched the core search technique of literary interpretation. In the search for semantic desktop through transversal algorithms spreading activation, this conference aims to activate fact retrieval and semantic document retrieval and interlanguage semantic desktop applications for language learning, analysis, and interpretation. The agonies of teaching and learning L2 has been addressed in several forums, but today we are rethinking language and literature and its entanglements in teaching and learning with technology. The central focus in questioning is a common tendency to problematize and expose the epistemological concerns at work in shaping the truth and preferences in literature and in teaching and learning languages. The critical attention of the anthropocentric understanding of epistemological approach to gain all 4 types of knowledge, namely declarative, procedural, contextual, and semantic, have been possible on this platform. To the various issues related to second language acquisition and the impact of cultural influences are to be addressed in this session by Professor Habimana Cedric in his deliberation on second language teaching is Sub-Saharan Africa, from a colonial legacy to innovative socio-economic enterprise. We, the conveners and the organizing team, profusely thank Professor Habimana Cedric, who without any second thought accepted our invitation at the last moment. Due to some personal reasons, the famous writer, Madam Kafula Mawula Pamila, could not join us today. At this critical juncture, we wanted our resource person from Zambia to address the academicians. When we expressed this to Professor Habimana Cedric through Dr. Yasmin Sultana yesterday, he readily accepted. It is our bound duty to thank both the resource persons at this moment and welcome them. I'm happy to introduce Professor Habimana Cedric, a gentle human being, renowned scholar, and former HOD of English. He has qualified himself in MED Applied Linguistics, BA-ED English and French Foreign Language. He is working as a lecturer of functional linguistics and language education, Rusangu University, Monze, Southern Zambia. Professors' teaching and research interests are in the field of teaching and learning of second or foreign language in multicultural contexts and early childhood. The development process of interlanguage between first and second language learning is also his area of specialization. On behalf of the collaborative institutions, organizers, professors of the collaborative institutions, resource persons, paper presenters, well-wishers, and participants, I extend a warm welcome to you, Professor Habimana Cedric, for your valuable presence and acceptance to deliver this lecture at a very short notice. I invite you formally to deliver your address, sir. Over to Professor Habimana Cedric.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, professors, academicians, and colleagues for inviting me on this important international conference at which together we ponder on issues relating to language education in a multicultural context and how we can better this enterprise together as a community of scholars. I am deeply humbled at this opportunity that is given to me to be able to share with you my thoughts. I'm not sure whether we are still together. Is the screen being shared? Thank you for the good introduction given about me by Professor. As he said, I'm a lecturer of functional linguistics and language education, and I've been in this career for the past 10 years at the university level. My concept paper this afternoon is basically founded in the comparative analysis of second language education in the African context and other worlds. And I chose to work on this particular subject because based on my years of experience, I do realize that the understanding of second language teaching, particularly from the African perspective, is slightly different from the way it may be understood in other worlds and other parts of the world, particularly in the Western world. So I've given primary focus on the needs analysis of second language teaching and learning in the fast changing African environment, and what I intend to propose as a model for maximizing the benefits for our learners that they should actually gain from these language programs. Let me begin, professors, first of all, by explaining the context of second language teaching in the African environment. First of all, we all know that second language is defined as any language a person has after or and second language learning, because in the case of the former, we are talking about a natural process through which the child acquires their language by the environment. And obviously, even though, of course, the learning program, that is the outcomes and the methodological approaches we use to teach a second language largely depend on the social cultural factors. What I mean here is when we look at, for instance, in Africa, the way we teach second language, we have always taken it from the legacy that our colonial powers left, where the second language in question is basically the official language of instruction in schools and government business. So it has become so much an important feature in our national life, because we understand that in order for us to acquire literacy and be able to function, the teaching of this language is given that particular importance because it is symbolic of a national status. Because without it, then it would be almost impossible to aspire to any other values that are espoused by the community of those who call themselves the educated people, professionals, and so on and so forth. But when you compare second language teaching and learning in Africa to the Western world, for instance, you will discover for them it is not an issue, because the language in question is a language that the population already speaks. And if there is any attempt to teach that particular language to speakers of the same language, it would not be a second language to them, but it would be a first language. So any other thing that they call second language in their context is simply a language program aimed at integrating minority groups, what are considered as minority groups, individuals migrating from different countries across the Western hemisphere. And those language programs are specifically intended to enable integration of those minority groups into a larger community that they find themselves in. So you can see indeed that there is a big difference from the way we would look at it here in Africa. Now, in order for us to appreciate the context and the approach that is given to second language teaching in Africa, we have to perhaps spare a moment to look into the sociolinguistic profile of Africa south of the Sahara, I mean. And when you look at this part of the world, we actually observe that more than 2,000 indigenous languages can be found to be spoken by indigenous populations. And out of those 2,000 languages, only about 100 would be seen to be of wider communication between ethnic groups. When we say there are languages of wider communication, it's because you can actually find a major language which is spoken by different groups of ethnic communities. But despite those ethnic communities having their own vernacular languages, among those vernacular languages, there is a sense of mutual intelligibility that is observed in those regional dialects. And so communication usually is not hampered to a greater extent because people can easily understand one another without interpretation. And based on this, actually, Adebija, a scholar, did a study on the functionality of the African languages vis-a-vis colonial languages, and was able to establish about 3 models that can be used to describe by minority modern-oriented groups of Africans. These are the group of people who are more like holding power and influence. They are politicians, for instance, decision makers, elites, and so on and so forth. And because they identify themselves as individuals who are basically exerting influence to the larger populations and are identified by having received the type of education which is pro-Western by large, so they have more like imposed their dominance of ex-colonial languages onto the rest of the people. Then on the other hand, you have multilingual groups using vernacular languages, plus, of course, an African vehicular language of national extension. Here in Zambia, for instance, we have about 72 ethnic groups, of course, corresponding to 72 ethnic languages. But among those 72, there are what we call big seven languages, which are spoken in about those big seven are actually languages that have a much wider coverage, including different ethnic languages that may be found in that particular region. So that is an African languages, but which is extending to a wider territorial area. And then on the third dimension, you have traditionally oriented group, which is either monolingual or multilingual at strictly local level. These are what I would call exceptions. There are a few countries in Africa that could be said to be monolingual, whereby the entire population of a country basically lives and communicates through one language. The example I can give include countries like Rwanda, Burundi, Lesotho, Swaziland. There you can find indeed the whole entire country makes use of a local language in their communication with one another, which is really an exception compared to when you look at what is actually on the wider African territory. So we can identify a number of characteristics of this profile where, for instance, dense multilingualism and multiculturalism is observed in Africa. And alongside this multilingualism, there is also the past imposition and the consequent present official dominance of colonial languages. Colonial languages in Africa, we make reference namely to English, French, Portuguese, and Spanish. And sad to note, along these two is a general official neglect of indigenous languages, particularly in our education systems, because English, in the case of Zambia, for instance, is made the official language right from elementary school level up to tertiary level. And hardly you can see intense teaching of local languages to the local people. And yet we know, according to a number of theories that are there, it is almost difficult to think of attaining meaningful development if one cannot have their initial literacy skills in their indigenous language. We know the impact of that. And then there is also an uncut colonial umbilical cord. What was existing in the colonial era has not changed at all in order for us to be able to function as new independent nations. Then there is Pan-African vehicular languages. of wider communication among African countries. In fact, when I was talking about languages of wider communication, African languages of wider communication, it includes also languages which can cut actually beyond territorial boundaries. We have African languages, for instance, which can be found spoken in more than 2 or 3 countries. I can give a special example of Kiswahili, for example, which is a famous language spoken in the East African bloc, where you have a group of countries, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, using Kiswahili.
Excuse me, Professor. Excuse me, Professor. Are you sharing your PPT? Are you sharing your PPT?
Yes,
You can share the PPT. No, your screen is not seen, dog.
Oh, sorry, just give me a minute.
Yes.
It goes beyond one country and covering 2, 3 or more countries. I gave an example of Kiswahili in East Africa, in Zambia, where languages like Chewa, which can be found in both Zambia and Malawi, which are 2 neighboring states. So, and in West Africa, we have languages like Yoruba and neighboring countries. So that's one more characteristic of the profile of Sub-Saharan Africa. And then we do have socially interwoven languages, language-related problems with the political undertones. What I mean here is that within the characteristics of the Sub-Saharan African linguistic profile, we have noted language-related problems, which in certain cases have led actually to tribal conflicts and civil war. Examples of wars going on in Cameroon between the Francophone and the Anglophone parts of Cameroon. We have had wars going on in Ethiopia. We have had wars going on in Nigeria based on nothing except linguistic diversity. And it is definitely a challenge when you talk about the profile of the linguistic profile of South of the Sahara. Then this brings me probably indigenous languages in education. How did the African countries handle issues of Am I still there?
Yes, it's okay, sir.
Sorry, am I still with you? Okay, thank
We're
you.
able to view your PPT.
So if a country was colonized French by the Portugal, are you able to see my PPT?
Yes, sir. Now we are seeing your PPT. Continue.
Thank you. So independent African states still use, to a large extent, language that have been inherited from colonial masters for official communication and medium of instruction in schools. And this is sadly so, despite actually having been a strong advocacy by UNESCO for the use of mother tongue in schools. Summit, the Organization of African Union by Unity by then, which has since changed into African Union. in their summit held, strongly advocated for the use of mother tongue in the formal instruction. But all that effort has really not yielded tangible results because colonial languages are still largely seen by the groups of elites that I mentioned earlier as the only languages that can channel development of newly independent African states. A similar call was made again in Asmara, Eritrea in 2001, strongly recommending that for meaningful development to be attained in Africa, indigenous languages must be used as medium of instruction. However, that either has not really yielded tangible results. So what do we have in second language teaching? In Africa, when we talk about second language, we see actually the teaching beginning at primary level, or should I say at elementary level, because even early childhood education, that has become a necessity of also being basic literacy, recognition of names and sounds of English language, not of their own local languages. And numeracy is also being taught in English. So you see English starting right at that level, going all the way up to the tertiary level of education. Of course, with the modifications, depending on which country the learning program is observed from. Because what I mean by modification, for instance, I just mentioned that in Zambia here, we have a new curriculum framework which was launched in 2013, which demands that the first 4 years of primary school should be done in the local language, while English is still taught as a subject alongside many other subjects that are taught in the local language. But as soon as the child transitions from 4th grade to 5th grade, then they start learning in the English medium. In other countries, the teaching right from 1st grade is in English language all the way up to tertiary. We do have also a few countries which still teach in their indigenous language for the entire primary course and only change it to English medium the moment they enter secondary school. But you would discover that the second language, in this case, which is English, would still have been a subject on the school curriculum right from grade 1. The objective of this second language is simply to equip the student with necessary language skills, which enable them to pursue their various academic programs and later operate as professionals in their respective work environments. That's the sole purpose of second language teaching. Contrary to what you would want to probably believe, would have been deliberate attempts to initiate language programs which aim at fostering unity of these diverse groups by probably not necessarily focusing on the objectives that progress one through academic journey, but simply fostering a unity of diverse linguistic groups. We find that on that particular part, there is a serious gap that needs to be bridged. The instruction model in the second language is that the lessons are dominated by rigorous grammar rules, situational context. Understand that we should facilitate the learner to quickly acquire the skills that would enable them to communicate in real life situations. But we still have rigorous grammar rules, which are taught in our formal schools. And then the other aim, which is basically envisioned, is the mastery of the forms and the functions of linguistic expressions which are suited for academic or later professional purposes. Obviously, when you look at the amount of time given, it takes almost a quarter of the entire time for more than 6 curriculum areas that are taught in our school curriculum. given the areas, in our case, numeracy, social development, art, science, technology, and entrepreneurship. So you can see really the emphasis is more on fostering the skills in this language that has become so important for the knowledge of less importance in the school curriculum. However, despite this attempt to give it much more prominence and importance, we still observe challenges in teaching secondary. Is seen largely exhibiting actually the acquisition of the desired or required competence levels. What do I mean by this? What I mean by this is that when you look at the teaching, is something that is restricted to a classroom environment. That means as soon as the child or the student leaves the classroom environment, they can go back to their cultural way or indigenous way of communication, which is basically in the vernacular language. And because there is no continuity, language, the competencies in the second language that were supposed to be achieved do not have actually much chance of being attained. And then coupled with that, there is inconsistent language policies by our formulation. Today, maybe there will be this policy towards language, and within 2, 3, 4 years, there is a new direction. Within another 3, 5 years, there is a different direction, and that leads basically to a lot of weaknesses, so that language programs do not seem should be able to be achieved by different learners within a long period of time. And then we have inadequate resources and equipment supplies for language learning programs. We do not seem to have enough funding and equipment, textbook resources, and other learning resources that are supposed actually to bring the learner to something close to native competence or near native competence. And that is a hindrance in the second language teaching in our African environment. But the worst part, I think, as a professional in this field, gives me so much headache to think about is the lack of innovation in curriculum planning and teacher education. Having identified the needs of a changing environment, ourselves as language teachers or scholars, we are supposed to be working more towards designing, or rather coming up with a new theoretical framework, which should be able to inspire curriculum developers to come up with new ways of teaching the language, and probably framing new objectives for language programs. But that is not happening really. It is as though we are content with the way things have been from the time we inherited these languages from the colonial masters, establishing something that brings more benefit that our current environment is in need of. And this is what I mean in the last point there, where I talked about lack of theoretical model redefining the use of L2 beyond academic and professional purposes. Well, like I mentioned before, Africa's colonial legacy restricts second language learning to serving the needs of the former national education curriculum. But when you look at elsewhere, are seen as facilitating national cohesion through integration of diverse cultures. And I want to believe we would all agree that integration of diverse cultures is such an indispensable wealth for national development, because through different cultures, different worldviews that are expressed in their different linguistic media, we are able actually to borrow wisdom from one another. We are able to get skills from one another, which should work actually towards the better of our states. But we are not doing that. And that happens even when we know very well the benefits of second language learning, which to some degree, of course, we are assured of getting a professional job to earn a living. There is a sense of to social status, because we want to be identified among those, of course, language in this case. And we know, again, in learning the second language, we ought actually to open our minds to other world views through international communication. And we can empower our people to exchange goods and services.
Excuse me, audience. I think the resource person is having some little difficulty. Please be patient. We'll get him online.
So please check the option, sir. So please accept the unmute option, sir. Yes.
We are getting the resource person again online. Kindly bear with us. Sir, Dr. Cedric. Dr. Cedric. Dr. Cedric, do you hear? Dr. Cedric? Dr. Cedric, do you hear? Dr. Cedric, do you hear?
He responded my message, Father, just now.
Okay.
He said he would get back.
Yeah.
He's checking his connectivity also.
When we tested this afternoon, it was a perfect.
It was a perfect one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll call him over WhatsApp and get back.
Please. Sir. Sorry, participants, we are getting the resource persons online again. Please hold on. Cedric,
Sir? Hello, Father? Hello, Professor Collins?
Sir, this is Dharmadevi, sir. It didn't enter so far. Just I am checking in the list.
Yeah. Just now I spoke with him over WhatsApp.
Yes, sir.
And he says he's fixing up the issue.
Okay.
Okay. So maybe
Okay,
you
sir.
can get to him and help him out also, if the technical team.
Yeah, sure, sir. And the problem is the bandwidth, Father. We have very low bandwidth. We received a message thrice from his side. So we can't do anything. We have to go for a good connectivity.
That's what he also said now.
Yes,
So
sir.
could you please contact him, or in WhatsApp his voice is very clear. Can
Yes, now he's entering, Father. I'm admitting him, sir. Admitting him, sir.
Please.
Professor Dharmadevi,
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
could you kindly ask him to mute his video so that he will have the bandwidth?
Yeah, sure, sir. We also ask him not to present the slides, sir. We will do both the things now,
We
sir.
will only listen to him.
Yes, sir. Sure, sir. Now he's online.
Thank
I
you.
will ask him to come.
Hello, are we together now?
Professor Cedric, please, can you just stop your video and also your presentation, you can speak so that we can hear you. Because when you use the video, I think the bandwidth is getting divided. So we are not able to hear you. You can stop your video and you can just talk to us.
What is your okay?
So yeah, your voice can be clear.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, the bandwidth is a bit low on your side. So it will be better if you only speak.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Professor.
Okay. Okay. Okay, I should have finished.
Yes, no problem. Please continue, Doctor.
Okay,
Yes.
I was basically sharing with you the African needs assessment, and I was talking about Africa being a place of high migration, mainly of people who are fleeing from war-torn countries, and that reality in itself necessitates that host nations should find appropriate language programs that are aimed at integrating these groups of migrants who have come to be part of who have made actually their new homes in other countries. And one thing that perhaps we have to take note of is the fact that these asylum seekers may show linguistic similarities with the host indigenous languages because they are actually coming from neighboring countries. But the truth is they do not have the same official media of classroom instructions, because the African colonial reality is that in one country, for example, you have English medium or official language, that the moment you cross the border, you step into a country which the new official or medium of instruction is actually French or Portuguese, and so on and so forth. And that's the African reality. I may give you an example of Zambia, where I am. On the west, you have neighboring Angola with Portuguese as official language. And on the northwest, you have Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, with the French as official language. And yet these are countries which have actually been offloading huge or massive migration of people who are running away from civil wars that have been going on in these two neighboring states into Zambia. And some of these people have become basically part of the Zambian community because they have been here for almost close to half a century. And they are actually part of the life of the Zambian nation. And so talking of language programs, which should also incorporate those people in the national life, is almost like a necessity. It's inevitable. And we cannot just rely on that which is done in a formal school, because the formal school is there for people to progress from a certain level to another level for the acquisition of course, the opportunities that Aon talked about. But what about people who are simply going about their lives? They are supposed to be doing small businesses here and there. They're supposed to be engaged into agriculture, entrepreneurship. What do we do for them? Because the reality of Africa is that not everybody is actually into formal school in order to acquire second language. And even if they were to go, it would take so many years for those people to attain the sufficient competence levels that would enable them basically to fully integrate in the community. But second language in Africa, which basically revitalize the contributions that some of these migrant groups could bring to the new nation, are actually almost impossible to do away with if really we want to make sure that everything that we do works to the benefit of the new African environment. In addition to that, Africa, interestingly though, is becoming a battleground for imperial powers and the expansionist influence. It is a known fact almost worldwide that of late Africa has seen massive investment from the Eastern Bloc, which has not been usually a tradition considering the fact that Africa has been so much under the influence of Western countries that have been the colonizers for a long time. But we have now new trends of immigration coming from the eastern part of the world into Africa. And so if really second language programs for a nation like Zambia, for instance, are to be of tangible results and yield really meaningful benefits, is that there should be capturing such kind of groups of people who are also coming to be part of the new African reality and integrate them into the national life. And failure to that, we would be derobing ourselves actually of a valuable input that should have come from such groups of people, even as we seek also to help them integrate into the new life that they have come now to be part of. We need a revolution in second language learning and teaching. And through this revolution, we must be aiming at bringing a second language that should be taught and learned to meet the needs of the changing environment. That's paramount. But not only this, we need also the new theoretical model that must recognize both the difficulties and opportunities arising from the new immigration trends, because this does not only bring opportunities, it brings also new challenges. And yet, language programs which are existing as of now do not seem actually to have an elaborate plan or program to mitigate the impact such kind of immigration actually could bring into the African environment. And so we need a theoretical model that must recognize the difficulties and at the same time see opportunities that may arise from these new immigration trends and inform new language policy direction. There must be language learning programs operating outside the formal school curriculum, which obviously will be embracing unity and diversity for development, which at the moment don't seem to exist. Who are the drivers of this revolution? Scholarly research is paramount. And I earlier on alluded to the fact that we are not doing enough as a scholarly community. We ought to be doing research that will provide a theoretical framework based on empirical evidence for different actors to be able to work with. Then obviously, we cannot ignore the importance of political will, which should be able to drive policy formulation process. And once we have the right policies in place, then the teacher education, resource mobilization, all these will be realigned towards the new language learning objectives, which will benefit both the host communities as well as the migrant communities who have to embrace one another for actually the development of the country. The learning contents, in my view, should focus on intercultural communication model in the classroom instruction, right from the foundation stage, because we are not going to professionalize this new language instruction program such that at a certain level, when someone is already grown up, that's when you begin to initiate them into the practice of intercultural communication, because children are being born in this environment. And these children are being born both from the host communities as well as from the migrant communities. They cannot afford to live as separate groups of people yet living in one territory. So intercultural communication model in classroom instruction must be certainly must be actually implemented right at the foundation stage. And then we must focus on the forms and functions of language for specific purposes. As of course the students or as people grow through their training course, they must be able to be introduced to the forms and functions of language which serve specific purposes. And there must be use of rich text. The rich text I'm referring to are those that are representing the cultures of different linguistic groups for language practice. For instance, when we teach comprehension English, for instance, right now, you can hardly see any text that is used in this case, which seems to open the minds of our learners that, oh, there is this other world view, which comes from a different civilization. We don't have. We only have texts which depict only the things that we do within our immediate environment and the things that have been part of our culture from the inception up to where we are. But then we cannot afford to offer education which is like that, where the new people who have come to be part of this environment cannot also be allowed to present or to show what it is that they think towards the world. And when we bring those texts which represent that diversity of cultures, we would be fostering actually unity, which is indispensable, like I said earlier on, for national development. In conclusion, what do I say? What I'm simply saying, and I would like to submit, is that language education should be able to discriminate the skills that are aimed at fostering individuals' sense of satisfaction in their personal ability to express themselves from those that should be integrating that particular person in the general culture of a unit that should function for the common good. What I'm simply saying here is that, yes, we understand that in second language instruction, there is a certain required level of skill that should be given to a person for their own personal use, for their own personal satisfaction. But at the same time, we should also recognize that even as we seek to empower the person with these language skills, we should also understand and appreciate the fact that there must be also another set of skills which should be able to be equipped now in the person for the purpose of appreciating the coexistence of other groups of individuals as well, who may not be sharing the same cultural background. And as we discriminate these two skills, it is not meant by any means to insinuate that perhaps we should teach one set of skills and ignore the other, but we are simply recognizing that these two must be incorporated together in one language learning program. And this is the business of a government. It is not a business that is left to individual institutions of learning there to decide what they want to do. In fact, I should have mentioned earlier, in Zambia, for instance, we don't have language programs that teach migrants, for instance, for the purpose of integrating them in the local environment. We don't have. I am aware that there are a few institutions which have taken, of course, an initiative to devise an English language learning program which teaches foreign nationals who come into the country, mainly for business purposes or professional reasons. But that is not a national program. It is simply an initiative of a given learning center to offer such services to interested clients. But what I'm proposing here is that it shouldn't be a business that is left to an independent institution to devise such a learning program, but it should be part of the national education curriculum. Now that we realize that as the states, that our social cultural environment is dynamic and is changing at a faster pace. And so at the same time, these two skills must be incorporated in one learning program in order to harmonize the harmful effects that might arise from neglecting one for the other. I thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity. And it is my hope and trust that we can also have an opportunity to learn, let's say, for example, from the Indian environment. Are we facing similar challenges, or could there be instances where we may be probably a little different? Thank you so much, professors. I wish you a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, Professor.
You're welcome.
Your deliberations were quite insightful, and hope, like me, all the participants would be thinking or comparing the Indian situation with your African situation. I think although we try to see things in a different perspectives, before we discuss, here are a few questions, Professor, for you. Can I ask those?
You are welcome, Prof.
Yes. A question from Professor Ravi Bhushan. Since language acquisition in the natural process is a subsidiary unconscious activity, how to create and sustain the integrative intrinsic motivation of learners in case of second language acquisition, sir?
Yes, actually, even as we talk about second language learning, I think Stephen Krashen provided a model that helps us appreciate the similarities that exist between first language acquisition and second language learning. And he goes further actually to propose that if we want to make second language learning to be much more efficient, we could model it after second language, first language acquisition process. And so the intrinsic motivation for a learner of second language should arise from the initiative and the creativity that a second language teacher in their classroom is able to bring to the learners for them to find actually second language interesting and much more easier than it would have probably been thought. And it is my view that the owners actually rely on ourselves, the language teachers, to be able to create an environment that is going to motivate our students in the second language classroom.
Thank you, Professor. There is another question from one of the participants, Samina Fahim. Madam's question is, do you agree that those who are good in L1 are good in L2?
Yes, I agree. Except my agreement, I would add, we'll also go with the context in which perhaps the individual candidate who is seeking to learn second language is being taken in as far as the instruction is concerned, because we cannot ignore the importance of the quality of instruction that have been given to the learner. And that is something the learner is not in control of. Yes, they may be good in their first languages, but if they are not exposed to quality instruction, which takes into account even the motivation factors that I was earlier on talking about, they may still be hampered or impeded on in their second language learning process. And so naturally, it should be the case that if someone is good in their first language, that goodness should also be a springboard towards maximizing their learning of the second language. In fact, research has proved that. I'm not the first one probably to mention that. But like I mentioned earlier, the quality of instruction is also key to determine how effective the acquisition of a second language is going to be in the case of the learner.
Thank you, Professor. Can I add one more questions?
Please go ahead. You're welcome.
Yes. You were talking about the contribution of migrants.
Yes.
What sort of a contribution, in your opinion, has been given by the migrants? Is it positive or something negative, which is the cause for the policy changes towards language and learning?
Well, in every scenario, there are always two sides of the coin. You will always have positive outcomes, and you will also have challenges that come with that migration trend. What I'm simply choosing to do as a scholar is to pick on the positives. I think linguistic relativity has shown us that by virtue of belonging to different worlds, we have different worldviews, which we also express within our linguistic media. And for me, I take a leaf from that theory that if I am given an opportunity to view the world from another person's view, that should work towards enriching the person that I ought to be. And if the migrants have come to be with us, and perhaps we do not have intention or a deliberate program that should probably get rid of them for us, then we ought to maximize on the benefits that their presence should be able to bring to our communities. Unless right from the start, probably we do not want the migrants to be with us, and in that case, it means we would be able to block them even before they arrive into the country. But if we have allowed them to come, it's because there must be a reason. Now, we can choose to focus on the positives that come with those group of individuals and see how best we can make something out of their presence. And this is the angle from which actually my argument is coming.
Thank you, Professor. Now, Professor, there's another question from Dr. Maria Arokyarad sir, who is one of the conveners. Now, his question is, each province in Zambia has a different tribal language. Then how would this L2 be of support in unifying the nation? Your comments, sir.
Thank you. The Zambian environment is interesting in the sense that, like you have rightly observed, every region or province has indeed a different language. Now, what that means is that since from the linguistic point of view, we want to believe that every language brings a wealth of wisdom that it can contribute to the universal wisdom. What ought to be happening should have been, for instance, an attempt to create one medium of communication which allows people to feel they are members of one community, but that is for political purposes. But for, let's say, for example, for the purpose of otherwise one feeling like every language is valuable in their own right, and every individual has the right basically to express themselves in their own indigenous language, we can still agree to maintain that identity, but at the same time encourage us to view the other linguistic view as also a vehicle through which we can enrich our well-being, because we would have had access to a share of the wisdom that cannot be expressed in any other language except that particular language. And that calls for the learning of languages which go beyond one's indigenous language, even at a national level, which means if one is coming from a province where Tonga is spoken, for example, in Zambia, we have a region where Tonga is spoken, the people who are in that region should be given an opportunity to learn a language which is spoken in another province. And when we put that in the national curriculum, we would be actually making people realize that, well, it is important that we do this, because when we do this, everyone is going to feel like they are part of the other person. Currently, it doesn't happen But that's what, in my view, I feel should be, if we really want to make people feel like they are members of one unity, one unit which is solid and unbreakable.
Thank you, Professor, for your wonderful answers. And thank you for the patience in taking up so many questions. Now it is time for me to propose the vote of thanks. It has been a
Thank you.
fascinating and engaging activity, Professor Habimana Cedric. I take this opportunity to thank the resource person of this session on behalf of the conference cell, the technical team, learned professors, and participants. I humbly thank Professor Habimana Cedric for accepting our invitation late night yesterday. The challenge of the digital platform with connectivity has been sorted out quite patiently from Professor's end. Our sincere thanks to you as a resource person, sir. The valuable thoughts of Professor Habimana Cedric has enlightened the audience today, and this reminds us of the new vibrant perspective of English language teaching and learning. Nations with English as L2 benchmark the interference of mother tongue in English language teaching and learning, and your deliberations today ascertains the thoughts. Thank you for your wonderful session and for your valuable presence. We will treasure your ideas and you as a person for your compassion. I thank the participants for joining hands with us. Stay with us for the next 2 days. Stay home, stay safe. Thank you, one and all. Here's an announcement from the organizers. Paper presenters are requested to leave for their respective Google Meet platforms and join for your paper presentations chat rooms. Thank you. And now before we close, just a reminder from the organizers. Now, please do understand that there was a voice break because many people were trying to get admission into Zoom platform. Dear friends, the Zoom platform will accommodate only a maximum of 100 participants. If you cannot enter the room, please join YouTube. That is our humble request because that will save another wire hanging. Another request for the paper presenters, those who wish to attend the paper presentation sessions, please, you can leave and join. And regarding the paper presentation, there will be many people entering into the room at the same time. If you cannot enter, please wait. You will be allowed inside. And your feedback link will be shared to you, and both through the YouTube and through Telegram. Please take time to fill in and respond. For your kind information, we have stopped accepting paper submissions. Only registrations are going on. Thank you one and all for having a wonderful day with us.
Professor Habimana Frederick, thank you. Thank you for your wonderful lecture and coming online in spite of the disturbances and making this program a successful one. My fellow conveners are also there. Dr. K.S. Antoniswamy, he is a professor and head of Loyola College. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Professor. Your discussion on SLA and SLL was quite interesting. It was appealing to me as I am a teacher of English in Chennai. There are a few situations I think, we also share similarities are there, especially with regard to the L1 interference and the need for integrating L1 into L2. You said you hit the nail on the head that we need to make it cross-cultural. Quite interesting and informative. I would like to thank you on my own behalf too.
Thank you once again, Professor Cedric. It was wonderful. In fact, in our campus, we have over 12 students from Zambia studying here in various disciplines. They are with us, and we're able to understand them now better. And also, as Professor Anthony Samisar already pointed out, the language situation is practically, it is similar. We could exchange a lot of insights actually and learn from each other. It was a very wonderful lecture, and it was very insightful. Kind of you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Good. Very good.
Father, shall we wind up?
Yes, sir. We can wind up.
Yeah.
The participants also are still here with us. You may leave and you could join the parallel paper presentation sessions which are on. You can choose any of the rooms and you could encourage the participants, the paper presenters, I mean.
Yes.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much. Let me thank you once again also for having extended this invitation to me. It has given me an opportunity probably to link to people who would later avail to me their own personal and local experiences, which I think would add value also to my execution of language instruction programs in our local context here. So thank you so much for having exposed me to this opportunity.
Welcome, Professor. Welcome.
Thank you.
We'll keep in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you.